This is Deep Dish Conversations, a series in which I, Jerome Moore, sits down with prominent figures in Nashville, Tennessee to talk about social issues over amazing deep dish pizza. Deep Dish Conversations models how to have conversations about deep issues around racism, housing, policing, poverty, and more. Plus, you will get an idea for where to get your next slice of pizza from. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy Deep Dish Conversations. What's going on, everybody? This is Jerome Moore, your host of Deep Dish Conversations, and we have another amazing guest and another amazing episode. But this, I always say all of our guests are amazing, but I think we need to put a couple exclamation points around amazing for this particular episode. We have former Nashville Mayor Bill Purcell, the fifth mayor actually elected here in Nashville from 99 to 2007. So during my adolescence years here, I probably met Bill because he's visited every school twice during your term, right?
Yeah. Three times actually.
Three times. So yeah. I don't know how many. So how many visits is that? 400 or something?
550.
550 school visits. So what? How did you accomplish that? How does?
Well, I mean, it's like everything else in life. If it's important and you're committed to it, you get it done. And I had promised as a candidate to visit every school. Because if it's important, you're there, you're in it. That's for you, but it's also for them.
Right.
And having done that one visit in my first year, I concluded it was important for me to keep showing up, being there, walking around, not just for me, which was important to see how things were going, but frankly for the people there, especially the students who maybe never would have seen a mayor otherwise or had any sense that somebody in the center of the city cared about them and what was going on. So that's how it got started. It just kept going, and it's among the most satisfying and I think important things that I did as mayor and maybe ever.
We got the pizza coming out.
Well, that's of course exactly what I was hoping. It's I've not had this pizza, and I've also this is a very special time of the day for pizza.
Exactly.
Especially pizza this thick.
Yeah, deep dish.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what we have here is pepperoni and spinach margarita. And so you can have your choosing of either one of those, and definitely interested in hearing your thoughts. They're going to bring out some plates and stuff.
Okay.
But, this is...
Well, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
I've never eaten pizza on television. I've eaten several things, hot chicken most recently during the Hot Chicken Festival. But pizza I've never eaten on live television or tape television, or we'll just see. I assume that if it gets terribly sloppy, you can edit it out.
Yeah, we can definitely edit it. Maybe.
If it would upset people at home.
We know bloopers, Give us your first bite, your first impression.
All right, I will. You told me they've been here about, what, 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years, man, yeah.
It's good. Spicy.
Yeah.
It's a good pizza.
Yeah, sometimes, you got to dig in there with the fork like I'm doing. Well, you don't cut it right.
It has the advantage as well. I kept cutting down on the possibility of a technicolor outcome.
While you chomping down on that, I was amazed when I went through kind of some of your executive orders that you did as mayor. And again, growing up here as an adolescent, we don't pay attention to politics. I'm just being a kid, right?
Okay.
But these are some of the things that I'm into now, or I've heard of, been in the meetings as a community organizer in community development. And so I just want to read through some of these that some of our listeners and viewers may not know were established by your office, by you. The creation of Mayor's Office in Economic Community Development, establishment of Mayor's Youth Council, which is a big one. Another big one, creation of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods. Ethics, conflicts of interest, and acceptance of gifts on the part of employees of Metropolitan government. Let me get, you got it. This is so many lists. Mayor's Citizen Corps Council, creation of the Metro Emergency Radio Management Committee, Criminal Justice Planning Advisory Board. Is this something that you wish you would have established that you didn't get to establish during your tenure?
That's a very good question. There is no question any mayor, after 8 years in office, has things that they wish they had either done more of or completed. Right. But what you come to realize is it's a constant work in progress. You can focus as I did on schools,
Right.
but that doesn't that's not the work of a year,
Right.
or a term, or
Right.
8 years.
Right.
I mean, that's just a constant effort, and the minute the city takes its eye off that effort is the minute you start to slip back.
Right.
So in general, I would say I was able to at least begin work and hopefully move the city forward in the areas that I had campaigned on and came to know were critical and essential to us.
Right.
But there's always more. And looking backwards, we had planned for flooding, but we didn't have a sense that there'd be a 1,000-year flood in 2010.
Right.
There are things that you plan for and think about, and then there are other things that simply, we're ready for emergency management.
Right.
It matters, but here comes another tornado.
Right.
Not something we had expected 22 years after the last time we'd had that.
Right.
So you do your best to foresee everything that you can foresee. You work on the things that are in front of you, and I was blessed and supported in working on the things that I thought were most important, and many of which continue to be at the top of the list for Nashville.
It's another interesting thing that I found during your administration is that you increased the education budget by like 50%. And education and budget is always,
Right.
especially just because we just had the budget cycle just past
Sure.
year. It just amazes me that you put, I think it was like $150 million or something like that I had read, but I know for sure for like 50% increase. Why was education so important to you then? And I guess why maybe haven't we continued that investment in education in the budget here in Nashville?
Well, you started this conversation this morning with education, and I'm glad to get back to it right now. I campaigned for the office of mayor saying that education was the most important thing we did, always had been and always would be. And I came into office believing that and realizing that if that was going to become part of who we are as a city,
Right.
that it was the mayor had the strongest platform to make that case. So the first thing you do, I think, is make sure you say it every time you can and make the case every time you can, so that when the moment comes and it's time for investment, that investment is there. Your city council supports you. Your voters support that notion.
Right.
And so from the day I walked in the door of that courthouse till the day I left, anytime I could, I said just what I said a moment ago. Education is the most important thing we do, always was and always will be.
Right.
And that means operating budgets. That means capital budgets. That means making sure that those school buildings are places that you want to be.
Right.
There is no way that if the air conditioning didn't work in this restaurant
Right.
on this day, that
Right.
people would have pizza. I don't care how much they love pizza. I don't care
Right.
how desperate they are for pizza. I don't
Right.
care. When it's 95 degrees inside this restaurant,
Right.
people aren't going to come, and the health department's going to close them down.
Right.
But we had, to some degree, lost track of the fact that these are the places where our kids do their business, which is learning. This is the
Right.
place where our teachers do their business, which is teaching
Right.
and helping. So you make that commitment as a person, but then you try to bring the city along and hope that you lock that notion in. So for 8 years, we did, year after year, increase both operating and capital investment. Again, most important thing you do ought to be the largest part of your commitment as a city. And I will say, frankly, in looking back, that since that time, every candidate for mayor who was successful has said, again, almost in exactly the same way, education is the most important thing that we do. Part of what happened here, obviously, was the Great Recession in 2007, 2008, and 2009. That caused a great decrease in revenue. Then a period of time in which we didn't seek new revenue in the city. But I will say that I'm encouraged today because in this last year, when the city council and the mayor, John Cooper, found and obtained more revenue, They said at the beginning of the process, and they showed in the budget, that they believed, again, that education was the most important thing, and they showed it with those budget numbers. So I guess I finished by saying I'm hopeful and optimistic that we're at a point now where that investment, and if I remember, you started out at Kings Lane.
Yeah, elementary.
Yeah. And so, Kings Lane is not at the center, but Kings Lane is at the center of your life and your world and where you were.
Right.
Choose your elementary school on the far corners of this city.
Right.
They all ought to be cool in the summer and warm in the winter, and the roof's got to work, and it ought to be a place where kids walk in and parents walk in and teachers walk in and say, this is important and people mean it, because look at it.
Right.
It's so that's where I came from. That's where I've been, and that's hopefully where we are as a city.
Another interesting thing that I figured out.
Okay.
All research, all top-notch investigation, is your push for affordable housing. And it's amazing as I'm doing my research on all of the things that you're implementing here in Nashville and your work during your tenure. A lot of these things are kind of reflecting today, or very current, right? Very trending topics, education, especially here in Nashville, specifically in housing.
Right.
And I found it kind of ironic that, you was able to implement around 26,000 affordable housing units here during your tenure. And that's almost close to the number that we need, or I think we like 31,000.
That's right.
Housing units we need to just, I think the minimum to kind of put a Band-Aid, or somewhat of a Band-Aid, over the affordable housing crisis here in Nashville. What's your? I know you're sitting on the chair now. You're the chair of the MDHA, the Metropolitan Development of Housing Authority. So what can we? What's going on with that?
Right. Well, to begin where you started, right? So 20 years ago, I acknowledge, I think most people would, that the issue of affordable housing was not front of mind for most of the city, and honestly for most cities in America. It just was not one of those issues that came first in the minds of chambers of commerce, community organizations, neighborhoods. It wasn't there. But what happened at that time, and to some extent for me, I was lucky and really blessed to have as a friend the mayor of Boston, a fellow named Tom Menino, who'd been doing it a long time. And early in my time as mayor, literally within weeks, he said, affordable housing is the critical challenge in Boston and in every city of America. If you don't have housing, people won't come. If you don't have housing, people can't stay. And it's got to be housing they can afford. And it registered with me very quickly. I came back into town, and to give credit, some of our social organizations, including our Rotarians and Kiwanis, the groups that have been to some degree throughout our history interested in these kinds of issues, had early data on that. So to make sure that we stayed focused, I established the first ever Mayor's Office of Affordable Housing, concluding that somebody had to get up every morning and go to bed every night thinking, the thing I needed, we got to fix this. We got to be sure it's doable. And so for the next 7 years, that's what we did. We incentivized the creation of new affordable housing units. We incentivized right near here and all around the downtown the creation of not just new housing. And by the way, Nashville, Tennessee was more successful, I think, than any other city over the course of the previous decades in moving people out of the city. But when I became mayor in 1999, there were 900 people. Count them, you could have. 900 people living in the core of downtown. There's over 15,000 people in that same core now. But at that time, we had aggressively zoned and moved and arranged for people to live, pushed people to live other places. So as we began to encourage housing here, we said, we want all kinds of housing, but we want to make sure a percentage of it, at least 20% of it's affordable. So we incentivized that affordable housing, and then we did something I think that is there's still more to be done on. We said, rehabilitating and preserving the housing you have is the quickest and easiest thing in many ways to do. You have an elderly person on a fixed income, been in a house all their lives. Well, the roof isn't right, or it's leaking, or the porch is in difficulty. They're immediately at risk of losing that house to codes or just simply to collapse. What do? Well, we can fix that.
Right.
We can, or nonprofits can, faith community can. Brady Banks, I know a mentor to you and a friend to me, is someone who was early on that, more than, 20 years ago for sure. Anyway, we worked at it, we focused on it, and like a lot of things in life, and I think from looking at your bio and your experiences, you know this too. If it's important and you work it and you stay on it and you don't let up from it, and you're on the right course, you have the opportunity to change it. So by the end of the day, when I walked out of office, I felt good that work wasn't done.
Right.
Important stuff never is. But we were on track and would have gotten to the goal that we had. And then the Great Recession came.
Right.
And then, like many cities, we became concerned about other things. And so in this administration of John Cooper, I think there is a renewed commitment. In fact, I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced of it again in the budget because there has been more money appropriated this year than before, whether it's the Barnes Fund and other related funds. Mm-hmm. But from my role now at MDHA as the chair of that board, what I see is the opportunity and, in fact, the desire in the courthouse, in MDHA, in the larger city, in the city council. There is an understanding about what you said about the gap.
Right.
There is a belief that the gap is a risk to us as a city. It's a risk to everyone in the city, especially people who need that housing.
Right.
And so I think in this area again too, we're at a new and really important point.
Right.
And so it's not absolutely breaking news, but it hasn't been yet broken in the Tennessean. MDHA just this week hired a new executive director, a man named Troy White, who I hope you'll have on this program. Troy has been previously the chief operating officer in the city of Atlanta, chief for housing, the chief operating officer for housing in Charlotte. He's run housing agencies in the Northeast. He's covered the territory. He has experience, but he also has a heart for the work. And I think you'll find that with his leadership there, in collaboration with the mayor's office and the city council, as well as the nonprofits in the space, that we can get back on that same trajectory again.
Right.
And I'll affirm what you said at the top.
Right.
If we don't, it's not solving it. It's meet this need.
Right.
Then we will be challenged as a city. In fact, I'll say something stronger. We won't be successful as a city if we can't have a city where teachers and librarians and firefighters, in terms of that sort of core metro employees, and everybody else, from the people who work here to the people who just came in with the largest corporation that we just recruited from who knows where. If they can't find a place to live, if they don't find this a place where they can be, we will not succeed. We will fail. And that's, I hope, now something we share. You said it, you're right, and we can and we will do better.
Growing up here, I never looked at housing it's just, it's because I've always been here, right? Until it's just Nashville started growing, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You see, because I'm in my bubble, right? I'm in my little bubble.
Sure, you were a little person for a lot of it, right?
Right, I'm in my bubble. Right. And so, a lot of things then I just wasn't aware of.
Right.
And housing was one of those things, the affordability, the housing. And so as Nashville's growing, you said something, we won't be able to keep people, but it seems like people just keep coming to Nashville. And it's the ones that have been here that seem to be suffering when it comes to affordable housing or gentrification, right? The G word, right? Gentrification. How can community, how can administrations, how can we put a plug in that where we have this new Nashville versus old Nashville, and we have it city, right?
Right.
And it seemed like, in my opinion, that it is more for the newer Nashvillians coming in with these bigger corporations possibly, or, moving from California or New York, but can afford the cost of living in Nashville.
I understand.
How can we get, in your best opinion, that old and new Nashville to coexist equally, equitably, in our socioeconomic Nashville that we live in?
And that is the big and great and important challenge of our time. The core work of the city is ongoing forever.
Right.
Education, safety, quality of life. But the issue that you've just addressed is the issue that is front of mind for anyone who is thinking about public policy, the great concern we have now. I think whether you're in the city government, I am confident, and I want to talk about that in a moment, at the federal government now, there is an understanding about this that has not been present for a while. And the answer is, who should it be for? It should be for everybody.
Right.
Who should being the it city or the place to be, and all the not just the glory, but the good things that come with having these opportunities and benefits should be shared by everyone. And there's every reason for the people who were here. So why did people come? It wasn't because of the next building we were going to build. It's because of who was here and what they were doing, and that's all of us.
Right.
So how do you? And your question is just right. How do you be sure? And what can you do to make it possible for people who want to remain and be part of this to do so? Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, as boats rise, all boats rise in a way that is right for the city and the people who live here. So on the gentrification issue, and it's bedeviling successful cities, from one side of the country to the other. You can look at places like San Francisco and New York, Chicago, where the numbers are even more stunning than the numbers we see here, both in terms of the wealth gap, income gap, and also in terms of housing and housing prices. I think you and I would be hard pressed if we put it, all that we have, and your videographer Joshua, and I don't know, everyone, we'd be hard pressed for us to find a place in San Francisco.
Oh yeah.
Just I'm not
Unless
saying
you work
it's
for Google
impossible.
or somebody.
Well, that's right. But under what we got now, we wouldn't make it.
Right. Stephen Curry.
I don't think, and that's me after a lifetime of work. I think it'd be hard for us to find that. And there's a challenge that I want to just hold up for a moment, and that is that in neighborhoods that are gentrifying, there are some people who want to stay right where they are. Mm-hmm. And then there are other people who have been waiting through decades of being overlooked and undersupported and underinvested. And now for them, there is a feeling of, I ought to be able, it's my time. Right. It's my turn. I've hung in there. I've done everything I was supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But now I'm ready because it's my turn to receive the benefits of that increased investment. Right. So on the one hand, you don't want to discourage people who have really, again, been there through thick, thin, tough, dangerous bad schools and the like. Right. And now all of a sudden their property is appreciated. They ought to have the ability to obtain the value that is theirs. Right. At the same time, the people that are there and say, I've been here all this time, and I don't want to lose my house to taxes. Right. I don't want to lose my house, my home, my neighborhood to some action, eminent domain, some taking. For those people who want to stay, again, back from my experience before, we should move aggressively to make sure they have what they need in order to do just that, to fix the roof, to fix the gutters, to fix the porch, to do the things that they may not be able to do, especially as costs of, right now, getting a carpenter, getting wood.
And I think that was highlighted even more when the tornado hit on March 3rd.
I think you're right.
Especially specifically in black communities, people of color communities in North Nashville, where historically it's kind of been underserved, overpassed, overlooked, and when that tornado hit, it's like, oh shit, we have a problem that's always been here. Now you have what they was calling them like investor predators trying to buy people's homes who maybe couldn't afford the co-payment for insurance, or maybe didn't have insurance, or was renters and didn't have nowhere to go and things like that. So everything that you're hitting on, that you're talking about, it's always been relevant, but unfortunately, like COVID-19, in most cases, it took something extraordinary to bring it to the forefront and wake people up. Like, oh, snap! Like this is the actual problem.
Yeah, and there's no question. If you had insurance and the tornado was in East Nashville, it's not simple. Right. Insurance companies are not always quick. Right. There's not always agreement.
Right.
Frankly, it was hard after that to get people to come in and do the work. But if you didn't have insurance, or if you didn't have support, the kind of support that the average person needs just to navigate the whole process of reconstruction, you're 60 plus years old, 70 plus years old, 80 plus years old, and you're up against all of that. There's no question that's back to what do you need to do. So you sustain people where they are, and you do everything you can to make that possible. I think you can, in the case of particularly where tax rates are the pressure, they can be, right? Your house is reappraised.
Right.
You were in a $27,000 house, and now you're in a $275,000 house, and your taxes have increased. There are programs that at least one of which I established as mayor, called tax deferral. There are also tax relief programs that we've had for some time. There are opportunities in looking at those programs and changing them so that, and a tax deferral is a pretty simple, straightforward program. You are 70 years old. You might be in that house another 20 years. The taxes have gone up. You can defer those taxes. Why did they go up? They went up because the house's value went up. So now you can defer those taxes as a receivable against the ultimate sale of your house. So that you still have much of the upside in terms of the value growth, but at the same time, at the other end of the pipeline, those taxes are paid, but you're gone, one way or another. You've either moved or God took you. So in that case, there are programs that we can do and can expand to address that kind of thing. But at the core of what you're saying is, how does the community, and I think this is the space you work in every day when you're not having pizza with me. It's trying to bring community together. Say, how do we support, sustain, help? Sometimes it's the city, sometimes it's a not-for-profit, sometimes it's the community itself, neighborhood coming together and saying, this is wrong, and this can be better, and we can change this, and we can help them, and we need to do that. It is, at the end of the day, and I think I'm just saying what you know. It's all of our work, it's all of our obligation, and that begins with the city of Nashville realizing there's a need and addressing it.
What's going on, everybody? This is your host and creator of Deep Dish Conversations, Jerome Moore, and I know you're enjoying this episode that you're watching currently. Make sure you hit that notification button and hit subscribe so you won't miss any of these amazing episodes. I appreciate y'all. Thank you for all love and support, and continue watching the episode. I'll holler. When we talk about housing, a lot of times I hear this conversation, especially when you're talking about the property tax of older individuals. Will somebody like myself that's 31 be able to afford a house in Nashville, or be able to get a house, be able to get a mortgage loan, because the prices are crazy now in 5 to 10 years? What does it look like for me?
Well, I think I take that as a question for everybody that looks like you and everybody who will come here. And the answer is, if we don't get a handle on it again, it won't look good at all.
I'm gonna come stay with you?
Yeah.
You got extra room?
Well, that's an interesting question, because that's one of the things that people are pushing, is the notion of additional units in the back of houses and the like, trying to increase the overall housing stock. If we do this right, if we address it, if we have the right mix of market rate and affordable and frankly subsidized housing for people who, whether they're disabled, their age, whatever it is. Yeah, we've been there, we've seen it, we've addressed it in the past. We absolutely can address this. But it's like other things. We look away, we don't focus on it. Then, like some other cities in the world, you could look up and find that you're no longer a place that people can afford to live. What happens from that? Well, all of a sudden, lots of things happen. All kind of people that are working in your city aren't living in your city. They're living in the next county. They're living a long way away. How do you see that right now? During COVID, people began working from home. Now it's time to come back to work in the offices. There's a whole lot of people, many of whom work near and around me, who are saying, actually, I don't want to drive an hour each way. There are a lot of other people who simply can't afford to drive an hour each way or drive across a whole city. If we're going to be successful, there has to be a place for people to live and for their families to be. And they have to be places, again, with good schools available. They have to be safe, and it has to be a quality of life that's shared. Circling back to the big question you asked before, the benefits of life in Nashville have to be available to everybody, or once again, we will not succeed. And when people look up and realize that those things are not available to them, they will either not come or they won't stay if they have any choice at all. And that is not the recipe for a successful city,
Right.
morally or economically.
I'm going to switch topics a little bit to something that's just as prevalent here in Nashville, which is policing. And I know during your administration, you put together the Criminal Justice Planning Advisory Board.
Right.
There's been a lot of tensions around policing over the last 2-3 years.
Absolutely.
More so, I think, than in recent times, right? Than I can remember from my age.
Right.
What are your thoughts when you hear words like defund the police, reimagining policing, taking money away from the police department, and I guess specifically here with MNPD in Nashville? And what are some things that maybe you thought about or even did during your administration around policing that you felt benefit, or what are some things that we can do that could benefit around policing?
Sure. And look, those images from Minneapolis.
Yeah, George Floyd.
What happened to George Floyd helped people see something that others had seen, but they never had. And as we began to look at, there's nothing similar, but other occasions when death resulted, all of that has caused, and you're right, many people, maybe most people, to suddenly begin thinking about their safety. So you've asked about the future. Let's go back to the past. When I ran for office 20 years ago, the thing that what I was convinced of and said again repeatedly is the whole city has to be safe. Everybody has to be safe.
Right.
And this, you don't remember this particularly, but I can tell you it was historically true here in most places. People would get up in the morning, open their newspaper, look at the news, and the news would say, in West Nashville today, or in South Nashville today, or in North Nashville today, or in East Nashville today. And most people who didn't live in one of those places would say, oh, that's not my neighborhood.
Right.
I'm okay. You know. And there are other people, of course, who put gates around their community or moved to another place that they felt, somehow distant from the problems of the world. And they thought, oh, well, something bad happened here, there, or yonder.
Right.
But that's not me. The core takeaway for me, and you know, I was a public defender for 3.5 years.
Right.
I was a legal services lawyer for 2 years. I began my whole career representing poor people who in many cases had no one else. And if the whole city isn't safe, nobody's safe. If it's happening over here, then it's going to affect you over here. If not right this minute, then soon or at some point. The whole city has to be safe. Everybody has to feel safe.
Right.
Everybody should feel safe, and that means safe from crime, and certainly safe from the kinds of things which have so focused our attention on the response of people in public safety or others. What we began doing 20 years ago was a change, and I still think is at the core of what has to happen, and that's community policing. And community policing is, again, done right, is what I think the space you're in personally.
Right.
It is about community engagement, community
Right.
organization. It's about police officers having trust and respect of the people that they work with and among and for. And there being a communication that is, in that context of trust
Right.
and faith. If I tell you about this, you're going to respond in the appropriate way.
Right.
If all that's there, and community policing, all the data on true community policing done right, with real trust, with a police force that is both responsive to and frankly increasingly looks like, feels like, understands the community in which they are working,
Right.
that in those cases, people are safer. When I became mayor, the number one statistic, and this was true everywhere in the country, we'd say, how fast did you respond to the burglary?
Right.
How fast did you get there after the call of the murder? It was
Right.
about response time.
Right.
And the difference with community policing and with safety thought about this other way is it's not about what happened after the crime. It's
Right.
about what did you do beforehand.
Right.
Because what you'd rather it be is there wasn't a burglary, there wasn't a murder, there wasn't anything else. Now back to the core of your question, and I think there's a general agreement that it really is about leadership and training and trust. Good news in Nashville, I think, is that Chief Drake understands these things.
Right.
I really do. He comes, I hope, and I've forgotten, you've had folks from his shop here. I don't know if you've interviewed Chief Drake yet or not.
Not yet. I've talked to him many times. Zoom meetings.
His personal story is a story of a man who understands. Everything you've said and everything that is wrapped up in what you said.
Right.
So from that leadership function, I think we have a leader who understands this issue of trust, as well as training, making sure that the reaction is appropriate and that people are treated the same and fairly and honestly and honorably across every portion of the city. But the last part, and this is, all of us have to do it, but the police, start, is trust.
Right.
Do I trust you? The blue lights go on. Do I trust that I'll be treated fairly?
Right.
And there's lots of reasons that everyone who will see this know, from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago, choose your time, where trust was missing. At this moment, with the world watching, I think, and part of it's because we're paying attention, and part of it's because they got more video and more opportunity to see.
Social media,
absolutely. I mean, and it's in real time, right? It's not the trial 6 months from now. It's here's the video what happened last night.
Right.
Here's what we saw, and it's not just police video. It's neighborhood video. It's other kind of video.
Right.
So all of that makes me believe at this moment in Nashville, with the right leadership. And in the mayor's office, by the way, they have a renewed commitment to this kind of community safety, I think, and believe. Certainly, the Community Oversight Board is there.
Right.
That was a matter of contention.
Right.
I don't see that now. I think that Community Oversight Board is going to be there in real time, saying, "This is what we know. This is what we don't know. This is what we need to see."
Right.
What I'm saying is, this is the moment, and I have to say it's on several fronts, whether it's education or this issue of equity and economic development, but also on safety.
Mm-hmm.
We, knowing what we know, we do the right stuff now.
Right.
We ought to get there.
Right.
Not 100 years from now, not 20 years from now, but soon.
Right.
We don't do it right. Well, that's not an option.
Right.
It's just not an option. We got to get it right. And so I think more focus on people, neighborhoods, neighborhood organization, all the things you're doing now.
Right.
That helps us. More focus, as the chief is doing, on the training of and the recruitment of, and that's a hard thing right now.
Right.
You may have seen the reports out of Chicago. We don't yet know really what's happening there.
Right.
But the numbers are bad, and the police department is struggling, and the community is struggling to know what to do with and about the police department.
Right.
And that's not where we want to be as a city or as people in a city.
Right.
So I think it's the right question to ask. You got to keep asking it. People have to stay focused on it and support this chief, who I think it's not just his heart, his head both are in the right place on these issues, but it's going to take the resources and the support of the city for him to get there.
Whew, that was a lot.
It's a life and death matter.
Yeah.
And it's a life and death in reality, and it's the life of the city.
Right.
If it's not safe, and I mean in all those words you used before, what people say.
Right.
Nobody wants us to be unsafe.
Right.
Nobody wants to be unsafe.
Right.
You got a home, let's say everything's working fine. You got a job, you got a home. Well, if your family, if your kids aren't safe, if your grandkids aren't safe, if your spouse, your own parents aren't safe,
right.
Well, you can't live like that.
Right.
And so there's nobody saying let's make us less safe.
Right.
The debate is about how to make us
safe.
Yeah, safe.
Mm-hmm. What are the best practices?
Yeah, in an honest way across board. The people who have used some of the words that you used, at the core of it, more mental health services, yes.
Right.
More social services, and yes.
Right.
More immediate attention to problems of drugs, alcohol, and the like, yes. The things that we know, there's no huge mystery about much of what has contributed for as long as we've been watching
Right.
to crime in our community. So all those things, I think there's agreement about. So rather than sort of battle around the words, maybe and I think this is where Chief Drake and Mayor Cooper are. Let's work to where do we need to invest
Right.
to get what we all want.
Right. If you were mayor today, present day 2021, 2022 is coming soon.
It is.
What would be your primary focuses here in Nashville?
And I am glad you asked, not because I want to imagine being mayor again. My wife would be very unhappy with me if I said that. But I'll say this in the way I said it 20 years ago, the way I say it in the class I teach on cities. It's what I believe with all my heart and soul, and it's the one thing that I hope I'm remembered for. The challenge of 2021 is the challenge of 2001. It was the challenge of 1901, even when we didn't know it, but now we do. Education is the most important thing we do. It always was, it always will be. Saying that means that's the top of the list. And if now we know better than we did some time ago, which is it's education, from the earliest days of life, providing supports to new families and parents, to providing opportunities so that people can work if they want to, and also have their kids be safe at that time. So it's pre-K, it's K, it's 12th, it's junior college if that's where you're headed. It's college, it's graduate school, it's education.
So I have a question around education.
Okay.
That I didn't think I was going to touch on, but I'm going to touch on it.
Okay.
Because I feel like I have to. When you say education and safety, a big discussion in the community now is about school resource officers, SROs.
Right.
And are they needed? Are they necessary for their presence in what they do? And we've had Captain Carlos Laura, we had Safer Schools Nashville, who advocates for a different approach to school safety outside police officers and having different professionals in there.
Right.
I'm not sure during your tenure if SROs were a thing yet in Nashville in school.
They were.
And okay, they were.
They were. But I will tell you how I thought about it then, and why I think the debate about it is so good now. And a lot of the students that I work with have raised this issue up, and I think it's worth raising. When we started, it was, and the program predates me, but I can tell you, the notion, as I felt comfortable, was in a community context, providing protection to the building from outside forces, while at the same time increasing or establishing and increasing the trust within a community between the police officers and the people there. What I think we hear around the country anyway, and I think we can talk about it because this discussion is going on in Chicago, Los Angeles. It's happening in every major city in America. What is their purpose? Why are they there? And how does it make students feel? How does it make parents feel? What does it mean in the community? If it were in the context of this is about keeping me safe, so why do we have a school crossing guard? By the way, they work for the police department. Why do we have it? To get you safely to school. Nobody's arguing about getting rid of school crossing guards. And it's good for the community. There's another set of eyes watching kids, watching families, looking, there they are. Nobody argues against that, and I would be the last one. We're pretty aggressive on that school crossing guard notion because kids, the days when everybody's parents could walk their kids to school, and those are long ago. So now we're back to the school level. You look at what's happened. There's some awful tragedies that have happened from people from outside coming into schools. And that was on people's minds even 20 years ago. So the notion of keeping kids safe from external danger is not anything I think we all disagree about. It's what happens in the context of inside the building. And the debate ongoing now, let me just say, I trust Chief Drake to get us to the right place on that. The things that I've heard people say, I understand all of it. I really do. The idea that you're inside of a locked building.
Right.
In other places, metal detectors, not here. In other cities, totally sealed up, almost city blocks like a fortress sitting inside the community. That's a place to learn.
Right.
With patrols in the hallways, no.
Right.
So it's the right question. It's part and parcel of the other question we just discussed.
Right.
And I think the main thing here is for the community and the police department to come to the right conclusion and agreement. Nobody disagrees kids have to be safe in school, and we ought to do everything we can to protect them.
Right.
What's the best way to do that? It could be another force, could be someone else, could be other people. But know that at the core of it all, I think the problem is those issues I described before.
Right.
Training and trust.
Right.
And the feeling of the community about what's occurring within their own community.
Right.
And if you address those issues, it may not change the structure. It just changes the whole environment and the climate for kids and families. But the debate's the right debate to have now, because clearly it's part and parcel of this concern about this relationship between people and their police departments.
So, what does a former mayor do after being mayor for 8 years? Because some people may not know, especially like persons like myself who, you were our mayor during the majority part of our lives, pretty much, right?
Right.
And so, what are you up to now?
Okay. I understand. Is this a good career choice? What are your options down the road? Should I make that left turn or right turn and think about being mayor? For me, and let me say, in public service, and I had an opportunity to serve in the legislature for 10 years, and I've had a chance to watch other friends and colleagues, people I've known, go serve other places. Mayor is the job for people who care about the things I believe you care about making things better for people now. I want, before we leave, I want to comment. I am encouraged for the first time in a long time that the United States Congress and the President of the United States are doing things at the national level to try to lift up the issues we've talked about and support people in a way that we haven't always.
Right.
But if you want to make a difference in a neighborhood, you're doing one thing: organizing that community. Right. It's a game changer. It's a life changer. You're organized. You've got things you won't otherwise have. But a mayor can respond to that community in real time and really make a difference.
Right.
Since that time, I've gone to. I was asked to come and start a new college at Tennessee State University, and I spent a year. Dr. Johnson recruited me to do that, and I was the interim dean of the College of Public Service. TSU still has the only PhD in public administration in the state of Tennessee. I recommend it. I commend it. Maybe to you, but certainly to people watching down the road.
I'm done. I'm done with school, man. I'm checked out.
I'm just saying, Dr. Moore has a nice ring to me, but you can decide. I'm just saying.
Give me one of them honorary degrees. Give me one. I want one of those.
Well, I got that. I don't have them right one with me. I went to Harvard from TSU. I was recruited to Harvard to run their Institute of Politics. I came home. I'm a lawyer, and so I've practiced law and done what I hope you and everyone watching this program will do, which is try to respond to the requests of my community to provide service when I could. So I do chair now, at the request of the mayor, the MDHA board. I'm involved with nonprofits in Durham, North Carolina, MDC Incorporated, which is a group much concerned about the issues we're concerned about here today, and some other local boards here, the Center for Nonprofit Management in Nashville, and Abe's Garden, the preeminent Alzheimer's facility here in town, and involved in issues of health. I'm chairing the advisory board looking into the response of the city to the pandemic, and as well as, frankly, this will. I don't know if it's the right way to finish this program, but for many years I've been involved with the issue of obesity, and trying to help people understand the effect of obesity on their lives and on the community, because I think we haven't always done what we could to address that issue. So health and education. I teach one course a semester at Vanderbilt now, and that's what I do.
Right.
It's gratifying, it's satisfying. I think one of the challenges for a city is making sure that there's opportunities that we reach out and include everybody as well, in boards, commissions, nonprofits, the life of the community.
Right.
And I want to thank you and everyone here, frankly, because I think this is a program, your effort to reach out and hold up these issues for people who might not otherwise. However, the people that are eating pizza at 9:45 in the morning just haven't had a chance to hear this before.
Right.
And I'm very appreciative. They can watch anytime, and I know they do.
Yeah.
But so I think this is one of those things, together with the work of community organizers and community organizations, that has the greatest potential to change cities and states and nations, and certainly Barack Obama is proof of that.
Bill Purcell, folks. Bill, I really appreciate you joining us for this brunch pizza. And as a Nashville native, I really appreciate all the things that you've done during my childhood, my adolescence, in making schools, investing in schools, investing in education, because I'm a product of that investment that you did during your administration. So I appreciate that. Appreciate all the visits that you made, and whether I remember them or not, I appreciate them.
Okay.
And no, just appreciate you being here, taking some time out of your busy life, and and still investing in Nashville. I think that speaks to your character. I believe that even after a long 8 years and tiring, I'm pretty sure, but you enjoyed it, but still investing and putting back when you can in Nashville, and making sure that it is a city that is equitable for everybody living in it. So thank you. Deep Dish Conversations, thank you. Take the pizza home with you. Share it with your family.
I will.
And in 5 or 10 years, if I can't afford a home, I'm living with this guy.
or if you need a lawyer.
Or if I need a lawyer, right? Hopefully I don't need them.
No.
But appreciate the watchers and listeners for tuning in to another episode of Deep Dish Conversations. We're probably going to eat the rest of this pizza, maybe right now, and we'll see y'all later. All right.
Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. That's a wrap.